Hey everybody, welcome to Sex is Medicine. I am your host, Miss Devi Ward Erickson, and I am absolutely delighted to have you here for another fantastic episode where we explore all the intricacies of sexuality, spirituality, pleasure, and personal growth. You can catch us here live on Contact Talk Radio Network every Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Pacific time. If you can't make that time live for the live broadcast, then feel free to catch us on Spotify and iTunes and TuneIn and all the major podcasting networks, podcasting platforms. You can catch us there. And make sure you stay connected with me and Authentic Tantra in between every show. You wouldn't want to miss a juicy drop at authentictantra.com and Authentic Tantra on Facebook, Twitter, Twitter, and Instagram. Yes, my favorite ones. All right, so I'm super excited about today's show because we are going to be talking about something that I do not talk about very often, and that is what it is to be a dominatrix and a hedonistic lifestyle. So this is kind of new and juicy. We haven't traversed this ground in quite a little while. So my guest this evening, who is going to be our guide on the journey, is Renee Mayne. And Renee describes herself as an unorthodox and freakishly gifted visionary and priestess of consciousness and intuition who leads a hedonistic evolution for women who are called to disrupt the status quo and make sense of their existence and to be initiated into a new way of being and connect with their divine selves. Yay! That sounds awesome.
Yes, I think so.
So let's start with how you began this journey of being a hedonistic guide and dominatrix and all of that stuff. Where did this journey start for you?
It started probably 4 years ago now when I was in spirituality and personal development for, at the time, probably about 15 to 18 years. And I just went to work one day and nothing would come out. Like I was just empty. I was frozen. And so I just stopped and I just thought, okay, like just step away and take time off. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get myself back together. And so one day in meditation, it just dropped in that I have to self-pleasure. And so that's what I did. I just started self-pleasuring, and because at the time, I think when we've got so much noise going on in our head, it can be really hard to listen to the whispers and to slow down. And then when you're in that mind state, in that frame of mind, you question everything that does come through. So you question, is that my ego pretending to be my higher self? What is that? And you doubt everything. And what I realized was when you're in that orgasmic state and in that blissful ecstasy, that life force, nothing, that's consciousness speaking. That's the divine speaking. Nothing can penetrate during that time. So it's your soul. So for me, it was the only voice I began to trust.
Wow,
so
the voice of your orgasm.
Beginning. Yeah.
The voice of your orgasm was the only voice that you began to trust.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So then where did it lead you? Where did it guide you?
So then from there, I realized that we can show up and we can, that toxic positivity where we try to positive think our way out of everything, and we try and bypass emotions. We talk about spiritual bypassing, but a lot of us are human bypassing.
Yes.
We forget to be human. And so for me, I was like, okay, we can show up in service, but how you show up in one thing is how you show up in everything. So for me, it was like, okay, let's just look at this. You've got, yourself, you've got sex, you've got spirit, and you've got service. And if one of those things are out of whack, everything's out of whack. So you can't show up authentically in anything that you do. There's no congruency there. So for me, that is where the hedonism dropped in, and the hedonistic way was born from that. And then as it evolved, probably 2 years ago, that is when I studied to become a dominatrix, and then everything else just fell into place from there. So, but that's where it stemmed from.
Beautiful. And so I want to dig down a little bit into the hedonistic way. What does that mean to you? Because I want to preface this, sorry, before you go on, I want to preface this by saying that the word hedonism often has negative connotations, right? It means this lascivious, kind of reckless, like purely pleasure-seeking, gratification kind of existence. So it has a lot of negative connotations. It also it also has some positive connotations. I know that I'm thinking of a swingers resort in Jamaica. I think that's called hedonism or something like that. Something like that came across my radar. But what does that mean to you, a hedonistic way of life? And why is that desirable?
Because, like, for me, so, when I launched the hedonistic way, I had people saying, how can you do this? It's overindulgent. It is, and I was saying all of these things. And so, but for me, what the hedonistic way is it's a life force, because if something doesn't give you innate internal pleasure, it is not sustainable. Service is not sustainable. Life, there's no joy in life. You can't make the most out of your existence if it doesn't bring you internal pleasure. And we reject pleasure in general. So many of us don't open ourselves up to receive pleasure. And that is what it's about. So for me, everything has a false power. But if you tap into your healthy hedonism, and what I teach in the internship is about desire. So if you look at desire is like one above fear on the scale of consciousness, right? So it's the only feeling state that has the ability to be so low on the scale of consciousness. But when you're in your, let's say, your healthy hedonism, it has the potential to be on the other scale. So it's one of the highest vibrational states, but it depends on your intention. So if you're like constantly in the pursuit of pleasure for personal agenda and personal gain, or for materialism, anything that's external, then yeah, for sure, it's absolutely toxic, right? And any bliss that it gives you, it's going to be short-lived. But that's anything, right? So so if you flip that, so if you flip it, so it's this internal, I call it this internal pilot light that sits at the base of our womb, and it's constantly, it's constantly running, it's constantly going, and it becomes a life force that just radiates through you and illuminates out into everything that you do. So for me, it's one of the highest vibrational states that we can show up in. And life becomes good. Life becomes, we become, what I always say is, it's, you inhabit heaven no matter where you're standing.
See, I love that. And it's so congruent with what we believe and teach as well. Pleasure is medicine, right? So what I hear you describing, to translate in our terms, is like pleasure is wholesome and holy. I think, just a little side note here, I was just reading last week that the Pope is like, sexual pleasure between married adults is sacred and holy, and and one of God's appetite. Like, food and sexual pleasure is one of God's appetites. And I'm like, that is fine, thank you. Finally. So this concept, you're totally correct, that we've been conditioned to believe that pleasure is shameful, dirty, wrong, and will lead us to damnation. And yet when we connect with our bodies and that innocent joy, that's actually a compass and a guide that leads us to realization. And then I love how you teased out that point that motivation and intention is so critical, because you're correct. We can just like seek gratification and pleasure to fill a hole, right? Because we're empty inside, or, you know, for toxic reasons, for non-altruistic reasons, or we can cultivate pleasure consciousness as a path of service and as a path of self-awareness. And that's exactly what the show is all about. So I'm so glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
Beautiful. So the hedonistic way is removing the negative connotations of hedonism and just focusing on altruistic pleasure. Pleasure is a path of personal growth. That is the hedonistic way. And so then how does that tie into being a dominatrix?
So it was this natural evolution, you know, for me, because within what I teach is I love the universal laws, but in particular, I love the mutable laws, right? Because I'm like, it fascinates me. Like, why do we have immutable laws? And why do we have mutable laws? Like, how can the law of polarity change? How can the law of truth change? Like, how can the law of gender change? How can that be changing? And so, you know, I've been teaching this for years, and I got to a point in my evolution where I went, they're unraveling as we speak. Mm-hmm. They are unraveling. Like, and so for me, I was like, okay, like truth is subjective, truth is changing, you know, and I always say, you know, as soon as you have to defend your truth, it's no longer your truth, right? And so, you know, so this I knew, and the law of gender, we're starting to see dissolve. We're starting to see there's more non-binary people than any and than ever before, you know, and so we're seeing this real breakdown of gender and even masculine and feminine. So I go, okay, what does life look like when we go beyond that? Like, what if we just show up as archetypal, where we don't actually feel like we need to label anything? So then we can actually step into our wholeness. And then I went, polarity. And then I went, pain and pleasure. How does that work? So as soon as you embrace your pain, you can step into your pleasure. So that's where being a dominatrix stepped in for me, was the law of polarity, because I went, how can I transcend what I believe to be pain or polarity? So we believe that everything is dualistic, but it's only an illusion. It's the man-made. So the mutable laws are man-made.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So exactly. I'm going, yeah.
They're social constructs.
Okay. Yeah. So like consciousness or God or the divine or universe or whatever you call it, it does not exist. Gender doesn't exist. Truth doesn't exist. Polarity doesn't exist. So I said, okay, we can transcend our consciousness and our evolution through pleasure by playing with the edges of polarity.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that is amazing.
Yeah, and it sounds like through this playing with these edges, it's like the goal or the achievement is non-dual awareness, right? Because that's what polarity is. It's a game of duality. It's black and white, right and wrong, good and bad, that kind of thing. And yet in the ultimate realm, it's beyond duality. It's the realm of non-duality. So it kind of anything goes.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, like, and you go, okay, like, you know, getting into, you know, that oneness state is so important, right? And non-dualism, like I consider myself, you know, an inspiring, you know, I thrive for non-dualism, but we can't get to non-dualism until we play with the edges of our polarity in our life, until we actually begin to reframe what we see as good or bad, right and wrong. Then we can let all that dissolve and we can find our equilibrium in that place. And so for me, and that's being a dominatrix, that's exactly what that does, because how we do one thing is how we do everything. And so being a dominatrix and BDSM gives us a really fun platform to be able to play with that. So yeah, it's exciting. I love it.
So what is it, paint me a picture. What does it look like to be a dominatrix? Like what do you do in your work? Like what is that all about for people that have like no clue whatsoever?
Yeah.
If I was going to show up and like hire you to be my dominatrix, what would we do?
Yeah. So you can be a pro dom, right? So where people do it professionally, and you would hire someone. But now what we're seeing is a rise of lifestyle dominatrix.
Okay, that is something I have not heard of. Lifestyle dominatrix.
Yeah, so that's what I am. So I don't do it professionally. So what I do is I'm a lifestyle dominatrix. So what that is, so everyone on the planet has a kink profile. Everybody.
Tell me more about this. Tell me, what is a kink profile? Tell me more about this.
So you would go, so you would like break down BDSM. So you might be into like, we think of BDSM and we think of like 50 Shades of Grey, and we think of the sex dungeon, and, we think of like handcuffs and whips and all of these, so bondage, right?
Bondage. That's the bond. That's the B in the BDSM.
Yes.
The bondage.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, and then a lot of people will think of like the fetishes, so the people who like hands or toes or feet, or, dress up as a baby or a teacher, or, so whatever that might look like. But there's a lot of space in between. And we suppress those desires, and suppressed sexuality is dangerous.
Amen, sister.
Absolutely dangerous. So the more we explore this within ourselves, we really begin to step into a hidden power within ourselves. So a kink profile, you might be like, so your kink profile might be predominantly what you would call vanilla, right?
I think so.
So, and a lot of people, but you can bring sacredness to that, but that's still a kink profile.
Oh, okay.
That's still a kink profile. And then you've got, there's the hedonist, and then there's the, so then it might be, so essentially it's sensory play, right? So what happens is when you deprive a sense, what happens to the other senses? They heighten and elevate, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So that's what BDSM is. So it's about discovering your kink profile and going, okay, like what desires do I have within me? And what does my partner have within them? And then what's that space in the middle? So what's a hard no? And what's a hard yes? And then what's that softness in between? So can you begin to see the ripple effect that has in someone's life? If someone knows what's a hard yes and a hard no, and that soft space in the middle where we get to meet and connect and find each other, and we get to dissolve polarity, and not necessarily, it may not dissolve, but we find pleasure in it. So no matter what comes into our life, we're all accepting, right? So like one of my favorite quotes in the Course in Miracles is, that which is all encompassing has no opposites.
Yes, exactly.
And I love that. So for me, that's what BDSM is just understanding yourself, understanding those parts that we try to hide because we've had, as you said before, so much shame around that.
Yeah, I love that. So as you're talking, I'm just getting the sense of this open playing field, right? And this freedom. So even just what you shared about, kink profile, it might be vanilla. Like that's lovely information to know, because I consider myself, pretty vanilla. Some people may consider me super kinky. We're all on the spectrum. It really depends on where we are. And at the same time, it's this invitation, regardless of what I consider myself, it's an invitation to explore my edges and explore those shadows, those areas where we feel shame, right? No
Yes.
matter like how vanilla they may seem or how extreme they may be, there are all of these little pieces inside of ourselves, particularly when it comes to sexuality, that we may feel embarrassed about, like these desires that we may feel embarrassed about, even receiving pleasure we may feel embarrassed or guilty about, right? This invitation to, instead of suppressing those, invitation to explore them. And then when they, you know, sometimes arise spontaneously, like having a regular sex session with your partner and realizing that, oh, you know, you feel a little bit embarrassed about how much pleasure you're feeling. Instead of pushing that away and suppressing it, bringing that out, being able to communicate that and bring it to the table and exposing those little fragments of ourselves that want to hide because they feel embarrassed and shame about.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Yes,
And
so I
you know,
love that.
they feel ugly. You know, sometimes is when, you know, it, like, I think, you know, for women especially, like, we find it so hard sometimes to speak and communicate about what we desire and what we want, you know, and it's like, you know, it's like, no, like, move here or move that, or like, no, that's doing nothing. You know, it's often we just, you know, we're so submissive to our partners, and we don't actually speak up. So for me, doing this work, it enabled me to actually stand up and be unapologetic for who I am and bring all of me. And you know what I realized is that even in our ugliest moments, in that wild primal rage, like when we unleash all of who we are, is sexy as, like, that is so attractive. And I've never met anyone who has gone, oh my goodness, like, you've been too much, like, no, you know. So what I found is, like, the more that I showed up, the more it created the space for my partner to do the same.
Yes. Yeah. But what happens though, because I hear this a lot from the people that I work with, and I've heard this a lot in my life too. What happens when we do connect with that space and start expressing it, and what's reflected back is that we are too much? Because particularly as a woman of color, often what I get back when I'm expressing authentically, especially if it's frustration or anger, is like, oh, that's too much. You're too angry, right? Or in the sexual situation, me personally being shamed for my expression is too much. And again, hearing this from so many other cisgendered women in heterosexual relationships is getting that shame feedback of when we finally have the courage to unleash that volcanic, you know, expression, that it can be overwhelming for our partner. So how do we recover from that if we do hear that it's too much?
I think the first thing to remember there, what comes up for me is it's not you. It's not you, it's them and their stories. And that is not our responsibility. Our awakening is our responsibility. How they perceive that or receive that, that's on them. That's on them. But we can no longer hide. And whatever comes up in our relationships or in that partnership or whatever that framework looks like, that's an act of, you know, is what I, you know, and that's what, like, everything happens for us, for our evolution. But that's not discrediting the imprint that from generations and generations that particularly people of color have experienced. That is an imprint that, gosh, I don't think it's going to happen in our lifetime, but I was going to swear then, so I'm not going to swear.
You can swear on our show. Haven't you been listening to the show? You know we cuss.
You know, but I hope, you know, I watch my girls and it's just, they don't see what that, you know, what I see. It's you know, so I do see it changing. But for us, it's going to be, sometimes it's going to be a hard slog. But if we can come back to that place where it's my awakening, this is my awakening, and be freaking unwavering in that. Because the more we do that, the more we create the space for others to do the same. And just coming back to that internal space of you know, of like, all of me is welcome. All of me is welcome, you know, and yeah.
I love that. And I love that mudra that you're doing. So for those people who can't see right now, Renee has got her hand on her heart, on her chest. I'm presuming the other hand's on her belly. And it's just like giving
It
herself
is.
a hug.
Yes.
Yeah, that mudra right there, that self-connection mudra. And I love that, because like doing that exactly in that moment when we do feel unanchored or unmoored because of what's being reflected back, is to dig into those inner resources and claim, like, this is my authentic expression. And one of the biggest messages I received several years ago from someone, I was all concerned, it was a colleague of mine, I was all concerned about like how I would be perceived and blah, 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 and this and that. And she's like, Davy, you have a right to have a fucking opinion. Like, you can have an opinion and express it. It doesn't matter if anyone agrees with you. You have a right to verbalize and communicate your view. So, so that's beautiful. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Oh, that's okay. I was saying to a client yesterday that, you know, she's coming out and she's standing up in her power and she's putting herself out there, and it's so beautiful to witness. But when you come out there, especially if it's got anything to do with eroticism or sexuality, you know, it can trigger and activate people. So she's putting herself out there, and she come up with some of her longest friends that have been, you know, like, they're coming up in her awareness, and I'll say attacking, but you know, they're questioning that and not agreeing with this awakening and her stepping into her power. And I said to her, you're an artist. Your job is to paint the picture. Your job is to bring this art to life. But does an artist like have this gallery, and is it the artist's responsibility to what the critics say? No. Like, everyone's a critic. Everyone has got an opinion, but it's the artist's job to bring the art to life. Yeah. To bring it out and wear the art. Yeah. Wear the art.
I love that. We are the art. You are exactly correct. We are the art. And this is our tapestry or landscape. Or
and this is our playground. Our playground.
Yeah. Canvas. Our canvas. Yay. So you as the dominatrix. So we know a little bit about BDSM. So you as the dominatrix, what do? Give us a little snapshot of like a scenario of like how you help bring this birth this realization for the people that you work with.
Yeah. So for me, what that looks like is, and I'm sorry, I'm just smiling as that comes up, because it's just, you know, like, your service is your medicine, right? So it just, when I think about, I just finished the internship this week, and we had the closing ceremony on Tuesday evening. And, you know, what I say is I teach my clients, I teach them how to remember who they really are before they become a byproduct of their life experiences.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, who are we when you know, when we're not subjective to all the trauma, when we're not a byproduct to the trauma and our life experience, or wondering whether we're too much or not enough, or are we worthy, or what are people going to think? Who are we then? Like, who are we when no one needs us and we don't need anything? Who are we then? So I teach them how to become a dominatrix within their own life, but a submissive to the universe.
Ooh, I love that. Let's explore that a little bit. So a dominatrix in our own life, being able to stand in our power, but is submissive to the universe. What does that mean?
So that means for me that we can't manipulate the divine. We can't fake, force, or fuck with the universe.
I love that. The 3 F's: fight, force, or fuck with. I love it.
Right? Because how often in spirituality have we been taught that if you do this amount of, if you say this amount of times, then it's, you're going to get BMW parked in your driveway, or you're going to get that house that you really wanted. You can go on that holiday that you really want. You're going to attract that man that you really want if you just do this. It's like, no, I'm sorry. You can't stop life. Life happens and you've got your own soul contract, and we have no friggin' idea what that contract is. So all we can do is step into our awakening and listen to source, listen to our intuition, and be guided by our intuition and our knowing, you know. And so sometimes, you know, with intuition and with being a dominatrix in your life, is you don't always see the whole picture, right? But your intuition gives you one step, and then you take that step, and then the universe rewards you, and it reveals the next step and the next step and the next step. So our job is to listen and be guided by the universe. So take the time to listen to where our soul actually wants to go, and not what's being dictated or forced, or, you know, or what society thinks that we should do, and just actually do what our soul really wants to do.
Beautiful. And I love how you're talking about how the intuition is our guide. It's our, again, our guidance system, and along with pleasure, if it feels good, right? It feels good. And yeah, one of the devastating impacts of trauma, particularly childhood trauma, is that we become divorced from our intuition, and we're conditioned in the Western culture to not trust our intuition, right? It's minimized. It's woman's intuition. It's dismissed as irrelevant or, you know, not real. And yet, as you're saying, it's like our guiding light. It's our North Star in life. So how do we learn to trust our intuition again? How do we learn to hear it and honor it and then act upon it?
Yeah.
What's been your experience?
So for me, it's really about, you know, giving yourself permission to actually trust yourself, because we all receive intuition. How we receive it will be different. You know, you might see it, you might sense it, you might know it, it might just drop in. So, you know, so that's really depends on what Claire we are. And then, but, you know, it's another thing to trust it, right? It's another thing to trust it, because how many times, like, have we done that thing and then gone, oh, I had a feeling I shouldn't have done that thing. And then you're like, damn it, why didn't I listen to my gut? Like, why didn't I listen? And so, you know, and so it's, yeah, so that is what, you know, my journey with intuition is constantly listening, constantly creating the space for that to happen, and knowing how we receive it, and being in devotion to that. It's really important that we create the space for that to happen. And so that devotion.
And I'm wondering if, because you mentioned, like, you got started in this work through cultivating self-pleasure and cultivating orgasmic consciousness. So is that part of your journey of reclaiming the clarity around your intuition, was through, like, reconnecting with your sexuality in this way?
Yeah, it was such a big piece. It was is that trust, you know, and because it was that moment where I didn't trust myself, you know. And you know, when you make it, and usually it's a series of decisions where you go, I can't trust myself to actually make the right decision. You know. And so you go, damn, like, what does that even look like? And so, you know, but I did actually go on to, we've all got it. It's a muscle, right? It's a muscle that we work. And the more we use it, the more we can actually harness it in our lives. And I studied the third level as a third level priestess at the Institute for Intuitive Intelligence. And so that gave me the platform to actually harness that and learn the science of intuition. Like, that is amazing. So we work with non-local intuition as a third level priestess. And so what that means is we field, the quantum field, to actually create this. And so, so we study quantum physics and non-local intuition. And so we tap into that knowing, that cosmic self, that universal one mind.
Oh, I love that. I love that. This, like, the quantum physics, the universal, the foam of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
That we all are kind of floating in. And also, like, so one of the things I learned recently, or relearned or reinforced, is the function of the vagus nerve, in that body brain connection, and like how gut feelings are that vagus nerve communicating to us. So it actually is, this intuition isn't just something in our heads, it's actually a physiological thing that happens in the body, that is the vagus nerve communicating to the brain, hey, alert, or hey, safe. Right? Yeah. I mean, so we're literally wired, like, intuition is a physical mechanism.
Yep. Absolutely. And, and it gets dismissed as woo-woo, or, all of these ridiculous things, but it is the most powerful tool that we can work with, because we don't react to life, we can respond to it. Yeah. And we come to that central place, that pillar that feels good, so we can actually be in the state where we can hear that whisper.
Yeah. And I just want to pause here for a moment and, like, celebrate the reclamation of being able to trust ourselves again.
Yeah.
Because I know I spent most of my life not being able to trust myself, not knowing what that even meant. So for those of you on the journey listening who are in that place of not quite entirely trusting yourself yet, I love what you said about every time we listen to that still small voice, every time we make the choice to listen to it, we reinforce it, we strengthen it. And eventually it comes to a point where it becomes a habit and a pattern to honor it, as opposed to dismiss it.
Yeah. Exactly. And something that really helped me in my study as a priestess was my teacher said something to me, because is like harnessing that intuition and trusting that intuition. And so it was like, oh, really? Like, and you doubt what comes up, and it's like, do I really have to say that? In terms of, like when you're serving someone in an intuitive guidance session. And so my teacher said, Renee, it's not about you. Yeah. It's not about you. It's about you being of service. Mm-hmm. And I just had the awakening, the realization that, and I feel emotional just thinking about it, because I realized that I can't hinder my awakening and my evolution, because if I don't trust myself and get out of my way, I cannot serve my sisters. And more than anything, I want to serve my friggin' sisters. Yeah. I want them to I want to go deep, and I want to transform their friggin' lives. But we stand in our own way. So as soon as we get to stand out of our own way, get out of our way, we can actually serve. And that may be serve your kids, that may be serve whoever in your job, like whatever that looks like. Everything is a service. Everything's a service, right? Everything becomes a sense of worship when you get out of your own way. And for me, doing this work is you go, you know what? So if anyone listening and they don't trust themselves, when you do this work, science shows that you change your lineage for 7 generations. 7 generations in the future, 7 generations in the past. And it's only 7 generations because that's all science. We have the equipment to actually measure it. So scientists will tell you that it's even further. So you can wipe out and clear your entire lineage. You can change it for future generations. The importance of this work is so huge, and it's not about us, but it begins with us.
Wow. Yeah, I'm getting chills as you're speaking. Yeah, and I think that's something like I've heard the 7 generations past and 7 generations future before, but I thought that was like a saying, like an indigenous American saying kind of thing, or some kind of spiritual saying. I didn't realize it was actually documented.
Oh, it's measured.
Right?
Yeah, it's measured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm getting chills because I'm cognizant. I've spoken with some of my ancestors about 7 generations back, and they're like, this is your work, sister. So to know that we can literally transform our DNA, right? Both past and future is so important, especially when we understand about epigenetics and how trauma is inherited, right? So if we can inherit trauma, we can also inherit resilience. We can also inherit our gifts. We can inherit our magic, right? We can inherit magic quite literally. And doing this work is the key to unlocking that from on a cellular level, literally from the cells.
Exactly. It's that imprint at a cellular level. Like, man, we can pass on the good stuff, the powerful stuff, instead of the friggin' shame, racism, inequality, like all of this other shitty stuff that we inherit, and that's one of, I say all the time is what we don't fix, our kids inherit.
Yeah.
So important that we do this work.
And their kids, and their kids, and their kids, and their kids, right? It's just passed down. Yeah. Wow. So what does it look like to do this work with you? You're in Australia. Like, can I just shout out, like, it's so fun. Me being like a North American person, I'm like, Australia, yay. So my husband actually got his master's degree from Australia. So so what does it look like to do this work with you? I'm guessing you work online in the time of COVID. And so what can someone expect? Like, what are the things we would go through to begin unlocking this wisdom from our DNA?
Yeah. So my journey with my clients is I have a temple experience. So it's called the Rise of the Intuitive Dominatrix.
Ooh, I like
and it's an internship where we have these beautiful temples where we explore and embody. That's such an important part of our evolution, is that we anchor it, that mystical realism. It has to be real, and you said earlier, and it's because I say it all the time as well, is to be a holy human. To be holy and human, and bring it back to the body so everything's amplified. So we teach the mutable laws. So we play with polarity, we play with truth, we play with gender, and we begin to dissolve them, or dissolve our perception around them. So we do that by integrating, and we also work with archetypes. So we get to know the archetypes within our body, and embodiment and movement is a big part of that. And that is what we do within the internship. So it's a really beautiful unraveling. And, I see my clients they physically look different, and so it's just amazing. And they melt into life. And so they transform, and they see these parts of ourselves that are suppressed. We suppress so much. And so what I say all the time is all of you is welcome. All of you is welcome, like whatever part, so it's a beautiful safe space where I say they can fumble through exploring, and you can be flawed doing it, and it's going to feel really awkward at first, but at the end you melt into life and you show up to life completely in your power. But you've also got a softness as well. So I talk about having a strong spine and a soft front surface. So being able to hold yourself but melt into life at the same time. So it's a transformational experience. And what I always say, it's the end of all pursuits. right? Because how many times do we chase the next thing and chase the next thing and chase the next thing? So this is the end of all pursuits. And you might still go and do the thing, but it comes from a completely different place. It's not because you're trying to fill this void and trying to get another certificate so you feel worthy or do whatever you have to do. You're not actually seeking and searching for something. It's coming from your soul's evolution.
I love that. And that is a big shift. I was talking with some people earlier, I think it was today or yesterday, can't remember, but we were talking about how at a certain point, it's like you're a seeker, and then you find your thing, and then you're pursuing a state of consciousness or realization with the tool that you found, your thing that you found. But then at a certain point, you achieve that realization. And then the shift is that instead of pursuing something, we're cultivating something that we've already created, that we've already tapped into, that we already are anchored within. And then it's a journey of deepening and resourcing and cultivating and devouring and ingesting and integrating. And it's a very different thing, because at that point, everything becomes the path. There's not a separation between you and the path, and there's not a separation between you and the practice. Everything becomes the practice. Everything we do and think and see, every email we get is part of the practice. So that's a huge shift that occurs. And yes, there may be other learnings, because, oh my God, there's so much to learn on this planet. Just on this planet, there's so much to learn, right? But it's from a very, very different place. It's from a place of peace and integration, as opposed to being lost and attempting to find that peace. A place of remembrance, coming from a place of remembrance. I love that. So how long does this journey last, this internship? How long does this process go for?
It's 9 weeks. 9 weeks. So and it's a beautiful experience. I love it.
And then how does this work translate into intimate relationships, like with their partner? So I'm guessing, do you work mainly with women in this work?
Yeah, mainly with women. So what happens with that is because we reframe how they show up to life so often. So what I experience happening for my clients is, and as I said before, it happened in my own relationship as well, is the partner goes, oh my goodness, like they notice this awakening, and then it creates the space for them to actually do the same. Like they begin to tap in and do the work. So then what happens in your relationship is a sacred union, a sacred partnership, so it changes everything. It deepens, everything deepens. I've been with my partner for 21 years, and doing this work and being in this union, it's enabled us to show up to life differently and model to our children what love looks like.
That is so huge. That is so huge. Yeah. And that right there is the reason to do the work. If you have children, is to be able to model to them what soulful empowerment and soulful union looks like. It's profound, because that's the template. That's the blueprint for all of their future relationships.
Absolutely. And and you think about the ripple effect of that, like this work that you and I do, like it'll change the world. It'll change the world, and being able to get to a point in time where you can have two mutually exclusive ideas and thoughts and opinions, and when we don't see the other person as the enemy or judging them for that, that is world peace.
Exactly. Well, as long as the other view doesn't rob me of my humanity, because that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of shit I don't agree with, and I don't have to. It's not my business, right?
Exactly.
I'm not married to you. You're not living in my house. I really don't give a shit how you want to live your life, as long as you are not robbing me or another human being from their humanity, right? So that's the only thing. But I love that. It's like this ability to coexist peacefully. We don't all have to agree, but we can still live on this planet together in harmony, and you do you and I'll do me. And so I love how doing this work is the seed for that. And the fruit is literally world peace. I say that often. The key to world peace is happy, healthy, intimate relationships, first with ourselves, then with our partners, then with our community, so on and so forth.
Absolutely. Exactly. And that's, and take care of that relationship with yourself, and automatically everything just happens. You know, like it just happens because you're doing the work for yourself. So, you know, and that's, and there's worship, and, you know, and every moment becomes a temple experience, you know.
I love that. Yeah. And what's coming to mind right now is you know, what do you say to those women out there that are waiting for their partner before they do the work? They're like, oh, before I learn Tantra, or before I do this thing, I want to have a partner first. So what is your message for those who are waiting to have a partner before they begin this journey?
I get asked this all the time as well. Like all the time. It starts with us. It starts with us. I waited a really long time for someone to actually say, come and save me, you know, like it's come and take me. Like, you know, I was like a violence, and I was in an abusive relationship for many years, and growing up as well. And, you know, I waited for someone to save me. I waited for so long for someone to look into my eyes and see my pain, and then I can do something, and then I can take that step. But then I realized I was the person. I was the person, and I'm the only one that can save myself, and the work starts with us. And I said to my partner, even though I had a when I first started, you know, self-pleasuring 4 years ago, I'd be in the bedroom, and if he'd hear me, he'd like bolt across the house, like make a Kramer entrance into the bedroom. And I'm like, no, this is for me. This is for me. Like, this is my connection. This is me being submissive to the universe. This is not for you. So he wasn't even allowed to enter the space until I was ready. And so the work starts.
I just want to put that out there. I want to footnote that for all the ladies out there that are afraid of making too much noise when you're self-pleasuring, doing your yogic breathing. Fuck it, let it rip. Put a sign on the door. I'm busy. Get you your pleasure. I love that modeling. No, this is for me. Y'all need to stay out. So claim it. Claim it, ladies.
Claim it every day of the week, you know. And another thing is, so I feel like we could just talk forever.
We actually can.
Is another thing is, I'm not his release.
Yeah, exactly.
I am not your release. So if you want to release, you go self-pleasure, you go masturbate, but I'm not your release, and he's not mine.
Yes, exactly.
And that is a promise we made for ourselves in our relationship and ourselves. And that is a big one, because how many times do we do that in a relationship?
Oh yeah. I mean, and that is a huge, we're so conditioned in the society to seek our pleasure through a partner.
Yes.
And it's criminal. We're shamed against receiving pleasure from ourselves. And then it's also denigrated. It's like, oh, well, if you have a partner, you shouldn't have to masturbate. As opposed to self-pleasure as a way of cultivating our own sexual energy and meeting our own needs for pleasure outside of our partnership, or, you know, in parallel to our partnership. But exactly. And so much pressure. If I am the only one responsible for meeting my husband's needs for pleasure, that's a lot of fucking responsibility.
Or if they've had a bad day and they just want to whack one out because they want that instant relief, I'm so like, no, I'm not up for that. Like, no, that is not sacred connection.
Yes,
that is
exactly.
No soul connection when it comes to that place. It is dishonoring.
Yeah.
And it serves no, it doesn't serve them, and it definitely does not serve you.
Yeah. Beautiful point. Beautiful point. So, unfortunately, our time together has come to an end for now. We will do more. And so, how can people get a hold of you? Your website, your contact info. If you're taking clients right now, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got the next intake for the internship starts on the 6th of October. So
Awesome.
it starts
Good
in a couple
timing.
of weeks. Yeah, it was great timing. And, but I'm on Facebook. You can find me at Hedonistic Queen on Facebook. And my website is reneemayne.com.au. So, but if you, or you can just Google me. I'm everywhere.
You're very Googleable. I did Google you. And for those of you, we will have Renee's contact info under the video on YouTube and, of course, on our blog at authentictantra.com.
Yeah.
And you can also sign up for our newsletter and make sure that it is delivered every Saturday morning to your inbox so you don't miss a juicy drop. Thank you so much, Renee. This has been enlightening and enlivening and such a pleasure. Such a pleasure.
Thank you, Devi, for having me. It's been really, really good. And thank you to all of your community. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, we love all you listeners out there. I love it. I just want to let you guys know, listeners, that I love it when you send me random messages here and there and just let me know you just found my podcast and that you're loving it. So please do feel free to send me messages at Authentic Tantra on Instagram and Facebook. Let us know that you've heard the podcast and that you're loving it. And that's what keeps us going. Your praise and appreciation does. Thank you again, Renee. Make sure that you check her out, everybody, at authentictantra.com and her website link, which will be below this video. Many loves, much love, many blessings. Have a beautiful, beautiful night. We'll see you next week.